Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Carly and from Missouri Group, and we are here today for our webinar on marketing automation in engaging networks. But there's Steph, and we're going to hand it over to him in a few minutes to talk through marketing automation. But let me first jump in with a few, talk about our agenda for today. So first, we're going to kick off by talking to you about why marketing automation and the benefits of marketing automation in your email campaigns. Then we're going to dive into engaging networks, and Steph is going to walk you through a few of the functions in the marketing automation. We're going to talk about split test campaigns, and we're going to talk about how to build out a general automation. So all of this fun stuff is to come. But first, why marketing automation? For those of you who are new to marketing automation, this is a great webinar for you. We're coming to you with this assuming that you guys are in engaging networks, you know the platform, and that you're pretty good at confident with creating a single email. If you're not, that's okay. This webinar is definitely going to help, so you can stick with us. But this is a webinar to kind of get you on to the next step, the next things that you need to do in order to make your automation successful. Whether you know it or not, everyone that you interact with via email is using marketing automation these days. It's not just for nonprofits, it's obviously for everything. So if you're noticing that after you make an online purchase and then you get an email suggesting other features or suggesting other products, if you sign up on somebody's email for a mailing list, you get a welcome email right away. These are all the beauty that comes from being in a marketing automation, and it is a great way for your nonprofit to really hone in and get your communication to a place where your constituents are interacting really well with you. Marketing automation does a lot of great things. The first is email journey visualization. It's not something that, personally in nonprofits I've ever really thought about or mapped out on paper, but visualizing that communication journey from the moment someone joins your mailing list all the way through until they're your top giver or your top fundraiser, being able to see that is very helpful for communication. It also opens up areas of opportunity for maybe if your question is, are we communicating too much? Are we communicating too early? Are we communicating, what's working, what's not? Using automation is a great way to be able to see that and see the results. It also is a great way to work smarter and not harder. And in preparing for this webinar, I found a lot of articles about how marketing automation has really honed in on staff time and staff work. So making automations do take a little bit of time and effort, but once they're there, you can run them for the life of your campaign or whatever. And so having the ability to use a tool that's going to make your staff have more time for other parts of their job is a really great thing to look into. Maybe you've tried A/B testing before, or maybe you haven't, but the concept behind A/B testing is that you present your audience with a couple of different views of the same bit of communication. And when the quote unquote winner has been decided, that's the automation that goes out to your entire group. Engaging Networks has a very robust A/B testing with some really great features. And so if you've not, as an organization, dove into A/B testing and looking at the way your emails are styled, but you'd like to, this is a great way to do it. You can also do a lot of targeted campaigns in marketing automation, and using profiles, the type of person that will go into each of your campaigns can be very clearly managed. Targeted campaigns are awesome. And I was doing again this research, I found this very impressive stat that something around 86% of all givers say that they react better to personalized content. And I don't mean personalized for each individual person, but rather personalized for your specific groups or subsets. And so targeting campaigns with personalization is a great way to increase your interaction. And then lastly, reporting and smart communications, because with marketing automation, you get real-time, very accurate reporting on the success of your tools and of the success of your communication. And then from there, you can really hone into what's working best, what maybe you want to see more. And it kind of makes you an email expert without being an email expert, which is a tool that I love personally. So a little bit more about the benefits of marketing automation, and these are some great statistics about what marketing automation can do for you, but I want to highlight the top three because they are very impressive stats. These are all things that we just discussed, but these are basically saying improved targeting messages is a huge, almost 70% benefit to your email. And it's something else that we as nonprofit professionals are always striving to do is to improve your customer experience and get better leads. And so as you can see, marketing automation really does help with that. So when do you use marketing automation is another question that came up. And if you are a newbie to this, you get to see that there are many ways that you can use marketing automation, and it's not just limited to this. Everything from a welcome series, as I mentioned before, all the way through to communicating with your major givers or sending program updates to key constituents who have a stakehold in a certain program that pushes your mission forward, recurring donors, newsletters, all of these great things can be automated and really work for you. There is also a lot of benefit, a huge benefit with doing a marketing automation or series of emails within DIY fundraising and also peer-to-peer in events. So after somebody signs up for your event, they're run through a marketing automation series that helps them set up their fundraising page, get it out to their friends and family, gives them tips and tools, and most importantly, celebrates their milestones when they reach them, but also encourages more. And then another really great way that I love to use marketing automation is in second gift asks. Again, there's some really great studies out there about the ideal time when to ask for a second gift after a giver gives for a first time. Spoiler alert, it's about 3 months after that first gift. So with a very simple marketing automation, you can set up communication that once they've hit their 3-month mark to be asked to give, now you know it's time, let's give them some more ways that they can help us. So long story short, marketing automation is here to stay. It is very successful, not just for nonprofits, but for every type of consumer behavior. And I am really excited that Steph is going to spend the rest of the time today walking you through automation. Steph, you can take it away.
Excellent. Sort of broadly, I want to break this out into sort of 3 main concepts, which are who should be part of your automation and what do you want to consider in that sort of first portion. Then we want to cover opt-ins and exclusions and exit points, because you need to think about some of those things in the beginning, sort of before you create the journey, and then we'll get into what are the components of a marketing automation journey. So let's start with who should be part of your automation. So this is a very sort of simple welcome series, and let's go to sort of the very beginning. When you're setting up an automation, you're going to have your settings, which is just give it a name and what's your objective. So in the second screen here, your first choice is who are the targets of this automation. So in a welcome series, we have this option for new supporters. And I'm going to suggest that this is the only time that you choose that option. That I think that one of the things that you really want to consider when you're creating marketing automations is that there is always the possibility that someone could be in multiple marketing automations at once. And we really want to make sure that we're avoiding email fatigue, not sort of over communicating with our audience in ways that we don't intend. So to that end, you'll notice we have this option here of include imported supporters. And for a welcome series, you're going to want to make sure that you do not check this box, because if you do an import of constituents into your database for whatever the reason might be, maybe you're entering in offline donors from an event, or you are adding contacts from a database migration, they're going to get that create date of whenever the import happened. And so they'll be considered a new supporter. And if they belong to, if they've been opted in to one of the opt-ins that you choose in our sort of next step, then they'll be eligible to enter that series. So for your welcome series, which again is the only time I think you really want to be using this new supporter option, I'm going to recommend that you do not check the include imported supporters box. Our next step, of course, is that we need to choose what opt-ins are going to be eligible to get the automation in question. This is a test account, and you can see that we have just a ton of opt-in lists. And for a welcome series, typically it's going to be your primary opt-in that they might check if they're doing a newsletter sign up, or if they've come in through a donation form or something to that effect. In other cases, it may make sense to create an opt-in specifically for the marketing automation that you want to run. And in your unsubscribes, when you're creating those emails, changing the language a little bit to say, for example, if you're doing a peer-to-peer series for a Bowl for Kids' Sake event, for example, you might change your unsubscribe language to be, you're receiving this email as part of our Bowl for Kids Tips and Tricks series. Click here to unsubscribe from this series. And then you can, when we say exclude records based on these criteria, you can put that, that opt-out, equals no down in here, so that they would sort of automatically be removed if their opt-out equals n, for example, which would be the value that they would get if they had clicked that opt-out. So it's just that idea of, certainly not in a welcome series, but in some other marketing automations, of adding an opt-in specific to that series can be a valuable way of allowing your supporters to get out of the series, right, without necessarily unsubscribing from everything that you do. For the filter options, I don't want to get too far into the details there, but just know that you can have a subset. So for example, you could say, we want to have a welcome series, but we only want it for new supporters where cell phone number is empty, for example. So we want to send them a message to try and get them to update their profile and give us their cell phone number, just as an example. But know that you can take a larger list and send to a subset of that list. Other options for who this automation will target, you have 3 options up here. Supporters who have donated within the last X number of days. I think that this is valuable if you want to automate your acknowledgement letters. So for example, for supporters who have donated within the last 30 days, maybe we just want to wait 2 weeks and send them a thank you letter. That's a great use of this, but I think for the most part, I would steer you to use supporters in the following profile. So let's talk about what are profiles. In engaging networks, profiles are a way of grouping supporters based on a query that will run every night. So let's take a look here. One example that I have in here is our Bowl for Kids' Sakes. So for example, we could say we want to find supporters who are either members or leaders in the following peer-to-peer site, right? So you could find team captains only, you could find members. You can also add conditions here. So let's say we wanted to find everybody, we would just add another filter, which would be peer-to-peer supporter type, and we'll add member, or sorry, add leader, and we'll find that same peer-to-peer site. So this is going to give us team captains and also team members, right? In this particular peer-to-peer site. Your filters are pretty extensive, so that profiles can allow you to find people who have donated a certain amount, people who, you know, on the peer-to-peer side, you can go by amount raised or have they logged in. You can find people who have responded to different questions, data capture activity, meaning have they filled out a specific form like your newsletter sign-up form, your fundraising amounts. If we take a quick look at that, you know, you can say, okay, people who have made donations, you have to choose a currency here, but then you can set a date range on that. So it's pretty extensive in terms of your ability to target different supporter groups in your database. And that's sort of why, if we go back to our who should the marketing automation target, it's why I recommend using supporters in a profile for, you know, things like a second donation ask, rather than using supporters who have donated within a date range. Again, I think this can be helpful for some of your simpler automations, like you just want to automate an acknowledgement letter where you're thanking someone for anything that's more involved or more complicated. You probably want to go with supporters in a profile.
Hey, Skip, I don't mean to interrupt you, dude, but I did see you picked a new supporters, and we had a great question that I think is appropriate for right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who is considered a new supporter? So are those people who have given money, or is this just people who've signed up to receive emails? Can you describe how Engaging Networks tags that and uses that?
Absolutely. So from the Engaging Networks perspective, a new supporter is a record with the create date of today, right? So that means I could be a donor, I could be a newsletter subscriber, I could be someone that your staff entered into the back end manually, or I could be imported, and that's where this includes imported supporters or not comes into play, and why I recommend that you don't check this box, because the system really does look at that create date. So if you did an import, if your intention was to get them into a marketing automation, then you would obviously want to check this. But for a welcome series, likely you're importing them for some other purpose. And so I would say leave this unchecked. Keep in mind, they also have to have the whatever opt-in you specify here, right? Or one of the opt-ins that you specify here in order to be eligible for the series. But it really is based off of that create date. So I'm going to go and just kind of take a quick look at this next section, and we'll come back to certain things as we go. But here's an example of a really simple welcome series. One of the things that Carly talked about was visualizing your communication path with the supporter, and I think that this is really pretty clear example of that. So in a welcome series, again, we want to target just our new supporters. One of the things that we know about email deliverability and a concept called inbox placement, which is does the email, in Gmail, for example, you have three categories of email. You have your inbox, which is typically your friends. You have things that are coming from social websites, and you have promotions. Well, one of the things that we know in terms about inbox placement is inbox that might go to promotions. If you've added that person to your contact list, you'll get better inbox placement in that they'll likely show up in your main inbox instead of one of these subsets. So one of the things that you might want to do in a very simple welcome series is to just send them a welcome email that says, hey, please add us to your contact list. If you send this, say, a day after they sign up, this is a time when they're most engaged with you, and they're most likely to actually complete that action at that time, whereas 3 months down the road, asking someone to add your organization to their contacts seems like a simple thing, but it's actually a much bigger ask. So this would be an example of why you might use a very simple welcome series. And we can see that at 9 a.m., Engaging Networks runs a query, right, to see if there's any new matches. If we have a new supporter, we're going to wait 1 day. And then after that 1 day, we're going to send them an email. And then that's the end of our journey. It's important, again, in this early stage where we're deciding who comes in to the automation, to think about how will they get out. And I know it seems like I'm putting the cart before the horse, but again, one of the sort of risks in marketing automation is that you could have over communication resulting in email fatigue. So we want to think about what is the goal of the automation and how will people get out of the. I need to mention that profiles can be created in more than one place, but to use them in marketing automation, you want to create them directly through the marketing automation interface. So we're going to select our profile, and we'll create our profile here. To kind of bring that point home, I know it's a little mundane, but you can see that under data and reports, data, I have profiles, and the profiles that I have under available here are not the same as the profiles that I have available under data profiles. So just an important note, create your profile through the marketing automation interface. Let's take a look at what are the components of a marketing automation and what's something maybe a little bit more complicated that you can really use for your organization. So I've got here just a Bowl for Kids Sake 2020 example, and this is still, I know we're seeing a lot of pieces. This is still a relatively simple automation. Our primary components in an automation are going to be our start, of course, right? When does the query run to see who's a new match for our automation? And then we have actions, which is typically going to be send an email. We can also talk a little bit about sending split test emails a little bit down the road. We then have waits. So once we've sent the email, we want to define how much time passes before we take our next step, right? There are also decisions, which we'll get into a little bit later, and then we have ends, right, which are those exit points. So you can see that in this automation, which is set up for a typical sort of Bowl for Kids Sake, we look for new supporters, and once they're in, we send them an email that says, now that you've registered, personalize your page. And this is a great example. This automation is actually in use by one of the Big Brothers Big Sisters affiliates for their Bowl for Kids Sake events. And we know that when your supporters personalize their page, if they upload their picture or if they change the story, edit the headline, typically participants who have personalized their peer-to-peer pages are much more successful than those who have not. So our first email is is to welcome them and to get them to personalize the page. And then we're going to wait 5 days. And then we'll send them another email to follow up to say, have you sent any emails yet, right? Have you reached out to solicit those donations? Again, we don't want to fatigue our supporters, so in this automation, we're waiting a number of days before we go to the next email. So our next step after a few days is, hey, have you thanked your donors, right? And then a wait point. Have you entered your offline donations? And then a wait point. Keep fundraising email, just sort of like a home stretch, like encouragement of, our event's almost done, and then a thank you, and then sort of a mission statement email that comes to our journey's end. So you can see that our start is linked to an action, which is linked to a wait, linked to an action. Again, this is a fairly simple automation. Let's take a quick look at how we would add an email to that action. So we're going to go ahead and click our edit button. Similarly to profiles, we need to build our emails through the marketing automation interface that you see here. So you'll notice there is a library, but this library is not the same as your email template library. You do have the ability to copy your HTML from, if you have templates in your existing email template library that you want to use, you can copy the HTML and you can come here and you can add that. But you do want to make your emails through the marketing automation interface. And the interface is very similar to what you're used to, and that you're going to give it a name, you're going to want a subject, a sender, or reply to, and then you're going to have your HTML and plain text versions. Very, very similar to how you would create an email on the email side in engaging networks, but just note you'll want to be setting your emails up through the marketing automation interface so that they're available for you to select. Okay, now that we have seen a sort of a typical but somewhat simple, how do we run our marketing automation for a peer-to-peer event, I think it's appropriate to mention a feature in the peer-to-peer module, which is not technically marketing automation, but since we're on the topic of coming up with ways to automate emails to be helpful to your event participants that your staff doesn't have to craft individually every time they want to send one, let's take a quick detour over into our peer-to-peer module. And I just want to show you briefly that when you're in your event and you're under setup emails, we have this button for new milestone email. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to create an email that will automatically go to any fundraisers who have raised a certain percentage of their goal or who have raised a certain dollar amount. So if we look at what that looks like, the interface is very similar to what you would see for setting up other emails in peer-to-peer, except you have this triggering percentage slider, or if we had set this up by amount, it would be a triggering dollar slider. Similar to marketing automation, if someone is eligible for, say, they've hit the 50%, they'll only get that email once, so you don't have to worry that that it would go to them multiple times or anything like that. But just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware that you could send these milestone emails, which would offer encouragement to fundraisers who had attained different levels. Or, for example, if you had a contest of raise $500 and you'll get a free tote bag or something like that, that you could automate some of that communication through the peer-to-peer module as well.
Hey, Scaff, this is a great place to stop you for a second because we've had another good question, and you're really good at talking about things just as the questions come in. So since we're here, this is a great question that somebody had. If we plan to use marketing automation for Bold for Kids' sake, do we need to disable some of the emails in the peer-to-peer interface? I know since you're here, so it's a great question. I know what I would say, but I want to hear what you would say, Steph.
Well, I think the answer is you need to be thoughtful about the emails that you are sending. So, let's just take a look at what's available. So your campaign is live, of course, is one that you'll see. Maybe you would want to disable that, maybe you would not. Maybe you would replace that with now that you're registered, personalize your page, right? I think it depends on the wait periods and things of that nature. I think having a confirmation go out at the time of registration is important. So maybe what we would do is add an additional wait in between the start of our journey and the send email, because that campaign page activation email goes out really at the time of registration, whereas there's always a delay in marketing automation because the queries will run once a day. So maybe we would put a wait in here. I think most of these you would not necessarily disable. I think it would really be more just being thoughtful about the content of the sort of system generated emails here versus the content of your sort of event automation.
Great answers, Steph. That's what I would say too. Okay, you can proceed.
Excellent. So I think that gives us a good sense of some of our sort of standard automations and ways that we can leverage some of the simpler things like welcome series and sort of tips and tricks for events. I don't have a full sort of series built out here, but I wanted to take a minute to talk about decisions. Carly and I were discussing this earlier, and if this is marketing automation 101, decisions could easily be considered, marketing automation 201, right? But we wanted to at least start previewing that and to give you a sense of how decisions can be used to really to powerful effect. So let's go ahead and we'll drag one of these boxes in here. Our marketing automation tools are all drag and drop. You'll notice that this wants to link to our wait, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. So typically you would have an action, then some waiting period, and then if you're going to use a decision instead of an action, it would be the next thing in line. And so let's go ahead and edit this and see what some of our options are here. Okay, as I said, this almost borders on marketing automation 201. Engaging Networks has recently released some SMS tools. That's definitely part of sort of the advanced series, so I'm not going to go into that today. And supporter information kind of is along. It's it's similar to what we said about filtering earlier. There are ways to leverage it. Some of it may be getting a little bit too into the weeds, but let's look at our most common two that I think people would be using, which are going to be email response and donation information. So for email response, and there we go. Now it lets me scroll. I would avoid using recurring donation or donation complete. The reason for that is the system, if you use those two, it's only looking at a donation completed through a link in one of your emails, right? So, for example, if if you have a second donation ask and you have a specific campaign donation form for that you're linking to from your email and someone donates through that, then the system will recognize that. Using this particular option, they wouldn't recognize if your supporter read your email, walked away from their computer, came back later, went to your main donation form and made a donation. Your communication really had the desired effect in both of those cases, but it's like a little system differentiation that isn't recognized. So I'm going to say for email response, stay away from these, and we'll look at how the donation response works in just a second. Page converted is similar in that if you are linking to any Engaging Networks page, whether that's a web page or an event form or a contact form, etc., if they land on something under Manage Pages that you've built in Engaging Networks that you've linked to from the email, that will count as page converted. And there are some reasons that you would use that. That might be getting into, sort of marketing automation 201, but the ones that I think are most common are, did they click on the email? Did they open the email? The people who do not fall into one of these two categories fall into this third category, which is email sent. Let's say you want to send an email to folks who opened your email. That means that you're going to want to have a corresponding condition over here where you're going to you're going to do something different to people who did not open the email, right? So we've got, so Engaging Networks sort of looks at this in a sort of a hierarchical or cascading fashion, right? So people who clicked will, if you add a condition for people who clicked and then you add a condition for people who opened, the system is smart enough to say clicked is, let's not include clicked in the open, right? And then similarly, let's not include clicked. If we have a condition for open, let's not include those people in the sent, right? And so here we could basically send a different email to folks who did not open the initial email, right? So this allows us to do some branching. Okay, let's now look at our other option here of donation information, right? And you'll see we have a number of different options. If we click on our last single donation amount, we can set that within X number of days, right? So if we're saying that we waited 2 days and we want to catch people who donated within that time frame, we can say, okay, anyone who donated within the last 2 days and their donation was greater than $1, let's say. And this will catch, as I said, I like this option more than using the donation options under the email conditions, because this will catch donors who donated anywhere through Engaging Networks, not just through whatever campaign donation form you had linked in the email that went out. And so, just to sort of put a point on it, we said we wanted to look at folks, how do we exclude folks, making sure that we're not inducing email fatigue on our supporters. So if they donated anywhere, that was kind of our goal. Let's put in a journey end here. I think we're at a good, reasonably good point. I guess the last thing that we want to cover are, you do have the options for split tests in Engaging Networks. So you can send an email or you can send a split test email, and let's just take a look at what this would look like. It may make sense for me to back up and do a new one. So let's get rid of that guy and we'll link this to that. Oh. Okay, so you'll want to give it a name, and you can add some notes, and then you'll choose your emails. You can also create emails from this interface. And the idea here is that you can make your split test on as sort of as many or as few differences as you would like, right? So for example, I deal with one customer who every time they send any broadcast email, they do a subject line test to see what gets better open rates, right? Their strategy is that once the email's open, maybe it doesn't matter how much there's a difference in content. Other organizations that we have worked with in the past want to know, for example, if they've gotten you to open the email, and let's say there's a donation ask, which one is more effective? And so they might try different content to show different calls to action and see which one has a better click rate. So those are the, so basically you can set as many differences or as few differences as you would like between the two emails, depending on what you want to test. And then once you have your test set up, as your marketing automation runs, these areas will update, and you'll see, okay, I've sent X number of emails, here's my open rate, here's my click rate, and whichever one is performing better after whatever window of time you think is appropriate, you just select one of them as a winner, right? And so then from that point on, everyone will get that email instead of getting, half of the group getting one email and half of the group getting the other email. So that's split tests, and I think we're at a good point to open it up to questions.
We're at a great point to open it up for questions. Thanks so much. So you guys can put your questions in the chat. Jeff, I have a question for you.
Absolutely.
I love it. Let's talk a little bit about split tests for just a moment. How do you, and I'm, again, spoiler alert, I know the answer if you don't, but but I'm sure you do. How does Engaging Networks use split campaigns to determine, well, in this case, you would pick it, but when you're using single emails, which I know is different than what we're talking about today, but an option for you, how does Engaging Networks choose the campaign that it goes out to, or chooses the winner?
Right. So I think you can specify the criteria, and I will let you speak to that, because I know that you've recently done some work with the split tests, but typically you would sort of set a time frame and say, which performed better based on either opens or clicks.
That's great. Yeah, you're right. Yes, that is the answer. So, I wasn't testing you. I think this is an important question. And so I know that when we're talking about in marketing automation, it shows that you have to go back in and look at it and which one's performing better, and that's great. And that's so you can get that choice and know too that you can always. Also, even if, let's say, the one you love isn't the one that's winning, but you're like, I still love that one anyway, you can always still choose. But when you also in your email journey or in your email function, when you do a split test campaign, what I think is really cool is that you can, after you predetermine your user group or your send group, you can set it to any percentage and any duration of time that you would like to do the test. So it essentially will take 30% of your email group, it'll send it to it, and then we'll let it wait a certain amount of time, and whichever one wins out of that, it'll automatically send to the rest of the group. So I think that's cool for organizations that are trying to play around, like you were saying, Steph, with subject lines or with maybe the placement of your donate button or content and how people are reacting to it. So that's really cool too.
Absolutely.
Just a few other notes before we close down. For those of you who are current Big Brother, Big Sister affiliates with a support contract with Zuri and you're using Engaging Networks, get excited because marketing automation, this specific tool we were showing to you, is included in your package. So yay for that. And then also, questions. So as you are going in here, if you run into a question or if you have a support issue that Skep or another one of our great team members can help you with, please don't hesitate to reach out to us on that. What is not included with your engaging networks marketing automation are things like setup. And so if you are one of those people who maybe is saying, I love the concept of this and I want to set one up, but I'm really nervous, or I'm not sure if I would be able to do this, we can help you with that. Please reach out to Kim and we'll see if we can scope a project for you that will help you build your marketing automation. So with that, I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your very, very busy day to learn a little bit about marketing automation and to spend a little bit of time with us. We just want to say a huge thank you, a huge good luck to you and your marketing automation needs, and have a great day, everybody. Skep, thanks again, and
Thank
everybody
you,
else.
Carly.
Enjoy
And
your
briefly,
day. Yes.
I'd just like to add, there is actually some pretty good documentation from Engaging Networks on marketing automation. I think having a webinar like this is helpful because some of their documentation is so thorough that it can be a little overwhelming if you don't have some of the concepts ahead of time. But along with the links to the recording, we'll put in some links to some of their documentation as well, because I think as you dive into this, it'll really help you, leverage the tools in a way that it will make you successful.
Thanks, Skip. Great little plug for the Engaging Networks Academy, which is very comprehensive. And now that you've looked at this, you can see it's even easier. You'll know what they're talking about. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great day. We'll see you next time. Bye.